Take cover, dear viewers. Tonight, XJ, Robert Gibson, Anthony Simeon, and I, your humble co-host Nikita Zuev, shall speak on something much more recent than the Conan stories or the Smith's musings on the cosmos. Today's offering is Sinners, Saints, Dragons, and Haints in the City Beneath the Still Waters, a tale written by N.K.Jemisin. This is my first read of this particular sort of work, so it's definitely always interesting to have someone new on the podcast for us all to read. The story takes place in New Orleans, right after Hurricane Katrina left its mark. I can still remember people talking about that one on TV when I was young. The story focuses on a lad named Tookie, who interacts with both eccentric and supernatural things. The world we are plunged into is vivid, with talking beasts and monsters, yet with things you and I will find familiar, like guns, credit cards, and shudders. The government. The atmosphere, too, is quite strong, helped by natural dialogue and needle-threaded world-building that I'm sure XJ very much enjoyed. Or maybe not, we'll find out. I have no idea, dear viewers. Maybe he hated it. So pick up your shotgun and your best friend Lizard, as we round up all the sinners and saints, dragons and hate in the city beneath the still waters. It's quite an interesting story. It runs about 9,000 words in length, plus minus. One can find it on a website pretty easily. We'll put a link in the description probably, so you guys can also take a look at it. It's free to view. It's from the Uncanny magazine, who have published a bunch of sci-fi and fantasy works. Some of the short stories being really good, including this one. You know, I really enjoyed it. It had a lot of good atmosphere. The structure of the tale itself is nice and like smooth as it takes you through the whole thing, and just, I don't know, the style of it all felt very authentic, so to speak. Took me right there. So, but I'll talk more about what I felt about it a little bit later probably. So let's start with the panel and see what the rest of the much more interesting folk thought about it. So, Robert, why don't you start? As you always pick on me to start first, why don't you begin?
Right, I haven't got a lot to say, but I will say that it reminds me, in general, not of any particular dream, but of dreams, in that it was very vivid, but I find it hard, a day or two after I've read it, to remember the actual logic of it, the particular details of it, yes, I find it hard to remember enough detail to say something intelligent about that side of it, about how it's written. All I can say is that I'm interested in old American cities. I'm interested in America full stop. I have shelves of books on American history. And New Orleans, founded in 1717, I believe, is now over 300 years old, which is good going for an American city. And Hurricane Katrina's time was it was slightly less than 300 years old. This is the sort of thing I think about when I read stories set in various parts of America. I immediately get to think not necessarily about the plot, about the fantastic aspects of it, but just about the nuts and bolts of the geography of the place. And being a total square, as I am, I have an antipathy towards the foul-mouthed language involved. But on the other hand, I know I can speak to myself both sides of the dialogue and just admonish myself not to be such an old fuddy-duddy. I won't obey that admonishment, but I can at least give voice to it. So
Yeah.
I'm more interested, and also I like the lizard.
You like the lizard? I thought you would.
Yeah.
But I don't have anything specially intelligent to say about even the lizard. So I'll ask
Really?
Anthony, being our one and only American on the panel, to tell us his views.
Yeah, Robert, I would highly recommend going to New Orleans. I've been there twice in my life. Once as a much younger man, right a few years before Katrina hit. I was there around 2001. I think I turned 25. I think I spent my 25th birthday. Went there in October of 2000, and probably the year 2000. I turned 25, and it was before Katrina. So, and then I just went back last year or the year before as a nearly 50-year-old man. So it was almost 25 years after my initial visit. And, for all the destruction that it went through, it is a resilient place. And as you see in the story by the end, our narrator, or our focus character, rather, uh, Tookie, is going back. He's not going to leave his city that he loves. And New Orleans has that vibe. I got to say, if you can ever get there, if you can visit a city in America, New Orleans is the place to go. It's got so much character, and the people are so passionate about it. They know how to have a good time, and they know how to work hard, and they know how to fight and come back, and even from massive hurricanes that destroy their cities. And while I was there, I've always had a special place in my heart. I kind of encountered that city in the Anne Rice novels growing up because she lived there. She wrote, a lot of her stories are based out of there or there, that when she wrote them. So I visited her house when I was there. So um, it's it's steeped in magic. Like you can almost feel like the magic, not just voodoo, but just like the magic of just people gathering together and loving a place passionately. But so this story definitely felt like to me it captured that magic. It really didn't explain why this guy was talking to a lizard. I was waiting for the story to kind of say, okay, he was sort of tapped into some sort of magical skill or ability or whatever, but it kind of was like by the end of the story, he even admits he's like he's a nobody. Yeah, he's not into like doing. He doesn't really seem like he's a shaman or a mystic or anything. So he's just loves the city. His blood and bones are invested sort of in the city. The city is in him and he's in the city. So it was sort of like this magical creature that he just took for granted in the area, sort of a manifestation of the city itself. And just like, spoiler alert for anyone who wants to read the story, uh, just like the creature, the hate, as it came to be called, that was sort of a manifestation of human hate and just human hate and human intolerance, which which African Americans have experienced, for centuries, and unfortunately, it's no different in New Orleans as it's been anywhere else across the country and in the South in America. So that was a great sort of admixture of like what African Americans have suffered treatment wise in this. So it was having it personified sort of in this creature, so it was very dreamlike, as you were saying, Robert. But I really love the story. I'd never read anything by N.K. Jemisin. I know she had those award-winning the novels that start with the fifth season. That's like, oh, I don't want to read another trilogy of fantasy novels. But even though it's award-winning, I should probably dive into it and check it out now because I really enjoyed the story. But yeah, I thought the writing was authentic. I thought the blending of reality, harsh reality of the storms and the levees breaking with Hurricane Katrina, but with the fantasy of personification of hate and hope with the small lizards fighting the big, I guess it was the dragon of hate. So yeah, I would say that's a great story. Anyone should read it who's interested in the city itself or just fantasy. And yeah, I had a great
Hmm.
time reading it. So yeah, thanks Nikki for suggesting this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think the story sort of places you into this world, pushing you into saying like, this is kind of like where we are, but also not, because the people seem to be okay with all the weird stuff that's going on, like it's normal for them. right? So I think the the story just invites you to take a leap and realize that this is kind of like where we are, but not really. And we'll leave it at that. I'm not really gonna right like explain, give like a catalyst, like in the 1950s when the UFO and Roosevelt fell down. In actuality, it was a meteorite of great power that
Right.
unlocked the
Yeah.
full power of magic. That doesn't happen in the story. It doesn't really
Yeah.
give you like a background, so that's fine. The dialogue, honestly, the dialogue really feels great in the story. I really enjoyed it. My favorite line is when Tookie is like in his mind palace says this hate is sort of like affecting him, and he's like, sound like some bomber motherfucker in my head. What the? I laughed so hard when I read that because it just
Yeah.
felt so real. Like that's what I would be thinking. Is this some fucking thing is inside my head? What the hell's going on? Like it's so funny. I wish that
Yeah.
that's like sometimes would just happen in fantasy novels where somebody would just get like a thought that's realistic. Like you're finding a gelatinous cube and like the author just goes like and she thought, well, fuck, I'm inside it now. What do I do? Right? Like, there's just, there's some verisimilitude that gets lost in the polishing of all of the way the people speak in works of art, anyways. And this author has a very very good understanding of how her characters should sound like, and you can really tell. So on
Yeah.
that point, on that front, I really enjoyed it. Actually, what did you think of the story?
So I'll start with what I do like about the story, which is first of all, I completely agree with Nikki. The speech patterns are all is. I've never actually heard a real Black American speech before, but it feels authentic to me. Like
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be able to tell. I've never heard it like really strongly before, so I don't know. But it seems authentic, and the community, especially that seems to be crafted around Tookie and his neighbors and all that stuff. It feels very real as well. Like it feels like a very neighborhood thing going on, and Tookie himself is a very nice character, great character. He's like he's one of those guys that just does what needs to be done without any seeming resentment at all. He just does it, and he's just like a great guy to have around, like pretty much a very upstanding, sort of dependable sort of guy. Um, if you're in his tribe, obviously, because it's not. He's also been doing a little bit of a drug running, I think, in the beginning of the.
Who hasn't?
Yeah, sure. Who hasn't, right? But all that aside, he's definitely that kind of character. So those are the things that I really like, and I also like the lizard. uh, that's it. Um, I'm wondering how to proceed with this because. So remember when Anthony wrote that short story about the floating city in the sky kind of thing, and
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we were reading it, and then I was like, man, I was thinking to myself during that podcast, I should get back to writing, and then I brought up one of an older story that I wrote, and the thing is that story I wrote was like forever ago in XJ years, I don't even remember the name of the story. I don't even remember the story itself. All I remember was that Nikki hated the main character.
Sounds about right.
And Nikki was like, yeah, probably have trouble remembering it. But by chance, I found that story. It's called the Coiled Serpent. I don't know if you remember it, Nikki.
Also, I
Yeah,
remember.
the one with the castle in the mist and all that stuff. The thing
Yeah,
is,
yeah,
I
yeah.
sent that to a magazine, and the feedback
Yeah.
that came back was, I don't know if Robert and Nikki remembered, and that the feedback was the first half of the story was too boring.
Mm.
That was the feedback from the editor.
Yeah, when they also like, oh, it's like, oh no, that was for Frost. That was for the Devil's Daughter. Never mind.
That was
That's
another
the-
one. So I wrote something,
Yeah.
the character that's a little bit more interesting, you know. But the first half of the story was very boring. So that was the feedback, second feedback. And I think Nikki, you agreed, right? That
Mm.
that the first part of the story is boring. And so this long about thing is, if I hadn't reread my story, my feelings on this story would be different. But I also felt that the first half of the story was very boring. That was like one very um, tense and exciting moment, and that was when Tookie shot the Haint. That was very rousing, and it was great to read. But the setup was very long. It was like more than half the story, and you know, like I reread my story, and I actually have to agree, the first part was very boring. I found my mind wandering the whole time I was reading my own story, and it was only when the story went into the castle with the coiled serpent that I stopped, my mind stopped wandering. And in this particular story was the same. It wasn't until Tookie took a stand to shoot the Haint that I started really focusing and paying attention. Everything else before that, my mind was just like wandering the whole time. And so that's it. I feel like this story isn't written for me. Like, I am not the intended audience. I have a very strong feeling because I think this story feels very allegorical in some way, because like that's like the world building doesn't make sense unless it is allegorical to me, because you've got this talking lizard, and then you've got the Haint, and you know, I don't know if anyone else picked this up, or maybe I'm just dreaming, because no one else talked to the lizard except Tookie. And Miss Mary made some comment about something that comes with the storm, but again, she and no one else actually saw the Haint. Only Tookie did. And so it feels to me like this whole thing is very dream. I think you guys also brought it up that it's very dreamy, but it it could all be happening in Tookie's head, but it also feels very different than that. So the only way it makes sense to me is that this is allegorical, and if it is allegorical, then it would mean a lot more to an American that's been to New Orleans, um who is maybe a New Orleans person, right? And is black, grew up in the black community in New Orleans, and that would be much. This story is probably meant for them, and not for a
Yeah.
guy like me. So I feel maybe if it is a New Orleans black person reading this would be like, it would touch him or her like real deep, but it doesn't strike that note for me. And I and the hint is actually really interesting because the author Jemisin, she multiple times she stated that the hint is an outside force, meaning the hate that went around during New Orleans, that Hurricane Katrina, was an outside force. Now, I don't know if that is the case, but it is very interesting to me that the negativity was exported to an outside force and not an inside force. So it makes me wonder what went on during Hurricane Katrina. Like, did
Yeah.
people are there people who deliberately make things worse or something? Yeah, those are my
Yeah, I
thoughts.
mean, yeah, it was, I mean, trust me, in America being so steeped in, what's going on with, the racial issues in America stemming from, our history of slavery that we had in this country and part of the founding of this country. Katrina was, I mean, you see the crowds of people on the TV. I remember seeing the crowds of people, like the cameras panning by outside the Superdome, which is the big stadium there for the New Orleans Saints football team. People were just going, help, 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 and it was predominantly a black city. So as far as the ethnicity is concerned, so it was painfully obvious that those helicopters, just like in the story, the helicopters were flying over. It was really just to take pictures of the devastation, and the help was very slow in coming. And it was a big failure for what was it, President Bush at the time. Um, it was a big failure and it just kind of starkly pointed out that, hey, it's a city mostly full of black residents. So, they weren't really a priority to help save. The aid was kind of very slow in coming. So honestly, the racial divides that kind of stemmed up to the present in the 21st century, kind of with Black Lives Matter and everything during the pandemic and up until now, where we're questioning the endemic racism in our society in America. Some people deny it, and other people, are saying, hey, it's there. People of all different races and ethnicities are saying it is there, and then there's the other side saying, no, it's not. So you have to sort of acknowledge it, or that creature, that beast, that hate won't go away. And it really is, for an American reading, it really is an allegorical story, unlike the hate or a hate in American folklore. A haint is sort of like, it's a Southern Americana thing, and it's an Appalachia. The Appalachian Mountains near the East Coast where I live are that extend into the South. It's very much a creature in folklore here that is a haunt, and it's a malevolent spirit. It causes bad things to happen, and it can, like in the story, drive people to hate each other and to fight amongst each other. So it's this personified hatred, and ethnic and racial divides are manifest through it. So it really is, reading it from my perspective as an American, having and seen Katrina on the TV, and and loving New Orleans from a distance. I grew up again loving it from a literary standpoint, seeing it in the stories I read, but going there and seeing like the passion of the people there and how vibrant the life is, and how, but yet as tourists, we go to New Orleans and exploit it. Like, I think there's a very short part in the story where they say people come to the city and they take from it and then they leave, but it's the residents who actually love it. But like, so kind of, coming down on the tourists who just go there to have fun. You go to Mardi Gras, you go there and have fun. You drink it up on the street, excuse me, as a tourist, and then you leave, and then you kind of don't really think about the locals who are struggling all the time, because it's impoverished, and it doesn't get the help it needs because it is a lot of black people that live there. So our country, our government, and our country, unfortunately, don't pay attention enough to them and don't give them the help they need. So it definitely is out. You picked up on that allegory, because I think N.K. Jemisin is a black woman. She, she feels it every day, like the divides in this country. So there's a big movement here for, black genre fiction and black art in general. So this was, I think, her contribution to it. And it was written in 2010. So it was 5 years after Katrina. So it was still very fresh. So, there is a movement to have more black voices in art, and literature. So, and even genre fiction, so which she is contributing to, and obviously very well, because her books have won Hugo Awards and etc. So, yeah, so you
I just
definitely picked on that undercurrent.
I just sent some pictures of like how Hurricane Katrina looked like in chat.
But yeah,
those
It
of
was
you who
terrible.
didn't see it on TV when I was I was a kid and I watched that live. I remember in
Yeah,
2005, so it's kind of vivid in my mind. But for those of you who haven't seen it, for the viewers, just Google Katrina Hurricane or Hurricane Katrina, however you else you want to write it, and you will see some very maddening, mind-boggling pictures of just the devastation that it wrought.
yeah,
I'm no expert at at these racial divide that transpires in America, nor would I ever try and speak on a topic that does not involve me. But one can definitely see that there is some sort of an allegory that's, being created through the narrative of this story. One does not need to be fully in the situation in order to feel the emotions, the
absolutely.
frustrations, right? Um, as he clutched his head and wondered if one could die of pure evil. I think that, that line, for example, is very, powerful, and
Yeah,
especially it is about Tookie experiencing the hatred this Hayton has projected upon him. Um, yeah, I think the story has what's it called? Definitely a lot of levels to it. Just like XJ said, it's not really written as the target audience being the four of us sitting here. But I don't think that should matter either, because the Conan stories were also not written for the four of us. Perhaps a lot closer to the dynamic of the four of us, rather than this story, which is completely passes most of us by when it comes to target audience. But still, right? Like, just because something isn't inherently made for you doesn't mean you can't enjoy it. But it does create a certain barrier of entry, so to speak, for sure.
yeah,
In some cases, I can definitely see that. However, I think the story itself takes great strides in keeping you at the very least entertained in some areas. And I agree with you, uh, XJ, in the stuff that you said about the coil serpent and comparing it to this particular tale. I would usually say the name of the story a lot more, but this one, all right, you cooked. It sounds really
Bit of
cool,
a
but it's very long.
bit long, shall we say?
Yeah, a bit
yeah.
long. And look, I think it should have a different name. The name that it is, does have Sinners, Saints, Dragons, and Haints in the city beneath the still waters. It's great, but to me, it sounded like this is going to be a 1920s detective with elves. That's what
Yeah,
I heard when I read it. This I thought that it's going to be like it's going to start with a guy, he's smoking some fantasy cigarette in the 1920s. Like, yeah, see, Al Capone is on the way. I don't know. I thought that's what was start happening, but anyway, it doesn't really matter what I thought. It's much more important than what is the context of the story and what is its power. And I just like the message of the story. That, like, yeah, it all sucked. It was a horrible experience. Some things back from home, I don't really agree with them. I don't like the way they go, but you know, it's mine, and I'm gonna return to it. So see you
Mhm.
there soon. And that's exactly like what kind of happens there at the end, right? Where and we get a small epilogue where it doesn't matter. Look, the human spirit, it survives. Human civilization, it goes. The water receded. Point. And then we go to the next paragraph. Clever, great stuff. Love that. Just 3 words. That's all we need. The waters receded. The time has gone by. We have overcome. The humanity carries on, right? So yeah, I liked it. It had good pacing, especially in the second half. First half was kind of slow, but it was being saved by the humor and the authentic dialogue. Even though it
Mhm.
was not as exciting, right, as the second part. The first part had the saving grace of the universe, of the atmosphere, of the how realistic it all felt, and because of it, at least on the first reading, I did not notice as much of a drag on the first part. On the second and third one, sure, definitely. What XJ says is exactly right. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, I want to read more of this author. That's really the end point of like that I reached when I finished this short story. I think they did a fantastic job, and I can't see any reason not to give them another shot, whether it be another short story or longer fiction. But yeah, I don't have as much else to say about it. What do you guys say? Do you guys have anything else you want to add on? Anything you'd like to discuss about this story?
Well, XJ made an interesting point about the fact that there are some things which only Tookie saw, or that's what we're led to believe. It reminds me of the film A Beautiful Mind. I don't know if any of you have seen that one, where again the main character sees things that nobody else sees. Of course, in that film, he's supposed to be crazy, but
sorry, yeah, go on.
it makes you wonder, Anyway, I think, and just one more point. To me, in reading this story, it's the city that's the real hero in a way, the protagonist, which is partly reflects my own interest.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. XJ, any final additional thoughts?
Yeah. Well, maybe just a really small point, and I don't even know if it's if there's any meaning to me saying this at all, actually. But so part of the reason why I was I sense very strongly that this is a story written for a specific group of people is because I don't know if you guys heard of, probably not Robert, but Black Myth Wukong was a pretty popular game in I think 2024 2025, and that game was made for a very specific group of people. And it's not even the people in China, really. It's just a very specific group of people who grew up watching the 1980s Journey to the West TV drama, live action TV drama. So there were a lot of things that the people who didn't know, who weren't that target audience, did not grasp at all. And so when I was reading some of the reactions and reviews of the game, I could sense like a lot of frustration about the story not making sense. I guess that's why I brought it up. I think it I guess what I want to say is that this story probably would be, again, I'm basically just repeating myself at this point. Like, it would be very, very powerful to the right people, but quite a bit less so to people who are not that particular group. So yeah, yeah, I'm just repeating myself at this point. Yeah.
All right, don't do it the third time then.
Oh man.
He said, "I'm just repeating myself twice." I'm like, "All right, just don't say I'm just repeating myself again."
Okay, you win. Yeah, I've got nothing
It's
else.
all good.
Yeah.
No, all good. Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it definitely has more of an impact if you are someone from New Orleans, if you are, a black resident of New Orleans, or just someone of that ethnicity in America. It resonates with you because of, again, the history of the country. I think though, any great literature, regardless of genre, and obviously fantasy and sci-fi, always are still kind of stigmatized as not having any kind of impact besides pure entertainment and mindless, escapism. But the, good literature from any genre can exist in any genre, and it elevates and it can educate and teach while it entertains. So, and I think that's what the story does. And I think it, even if we're not part of the, the demographic that it depicts, we can at least gain some empathy from it and hopefully learn from it and see from an insider's perspective. If we're not part of that demographic, but we can see, looking from outside, we can get, I think, this is a great story because it projects out what it feels like to be in that situation. And I think from an outsider's perspective, as an American who watched it happen, and it definitely reeks of, in a good way. It kind of really exudes. I think that's the word I'm looking for. It exudes that flavor of that time and that experience. So yeah, I think for that, I'm going to just jump right into the grades. I'm going to give it a 9. A score of 9,
Yeah,
just for
9 out
that.
of 10.
There were a 9 out of 10. So there were moments when I was like, yeah, the beginning. But I think I just love New Orleans and that area, and really kind of got into the history of it, the city and everything. But I think it was a little, I can see what you're saying. It was a little slow in the beginning, but it was really focusing on like teaching like what the aftermath for the locals was and the impact of Katrina. And again, in the end, it doesn't really matter what the lizard was or the hate itself was or were. It was manifestations of the city, and opposing forces, Um, so yeah, I give it a 9 out of 10, and good story.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much. I'm gonna go next. I'll say that the story itself is very well made. The prose and the way the author speaks also spoke to me. Despite the fact that I don't come around the demographic, neither was I born in the New Orleans, nor as evidently seen by anyone with eyes. I am not African American, yet still, just the soul of the thing. It sings to me. It's really well made. I'll give it a Robert score. I'll give it a 10 out of 10.
Nice. All right. Speaking of Robert,
Well, okay, Rob,
or
you can go
XJ,
first.
whoever,
Yeah, nobody cares, XJ.
whoever jumped in, XJ, Robert.
What a dickhead. Eh? Excuse me,
Next score.
please.
Yeah, go ahead,
Fight
Hmm.
amongst
Rob.
It was like nobody cares about my stuff.
I was gonna let him go anyway.
All right, sorry. Go on, Robert. What is your score? And why is it 10 out of 10?
I'll give it 7.5, I think.
Whoa,
Okay.
unreadable, basically, like by your standards. Actually, what did you think about this? How much do you give it?
I'm giving it a personal score of 7, but I recognize that with the right person, it would have been a 10. Yeah.
Mm.
Just because it's not meant for me, basically.
Yeah, fair. I get you.
Hmm.
Okay. But I think it was an enjoyable experience for us all. I don't think any of us would have found this one seeking it out. Just kind of like stumbled upon it through a recommendation of a friend. And I think we got at least something new in the bloodstream at the very least for some of you. You got to experience something you wouldn't have before.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to thank all of our readers, all of our viewers is what I meant to say, for jumping in tonight, just as any time, and listening to our podcast. Comment, subscribe, tell your mother about it, your grandmother, all your family. Make them watch it. They don't understand YouTube anyway. Just put it on. Figure it out. And thank you, all of us, the panel, for coming in today and discussing the story. Yeah. Thanks, everyone, for watching.
Thank you.